We all know that one person who thinks they know everything, right? But they don't, because nobody can know everything about everything. If they could, we wouldn't have so many mind-boggling mysteries that even the smartest historians, archaeologists, and scientists can't figure out. We've got a whole bunch of those mysteries for you in this video, so get ready to have your mind blown. Newspaper rock petroglyphs. Next up, it's Newspaper Rock in Monticello, Utah. This is one of the largest collections of petroglyphs in the world, serving as a record of more than 2,000 years of human activity in the region. The massive sandstone slab can be found in San Juan County. It's a stunning thing to look at, but understanding it is far more difficult. The precise meaning of many of the glyphs is unknown. The markings were made in sequence by the Archaic, Basket Maker, Fremont, and Pueblo cultures, with the final glyphs added by Navajo and Anglo tribesmen. In the native Navajo language, Newspaper Rock is known as Tse-Hichne, which means the rock that tells a story. There are more than 650 individual designs here, created by chipping away at the dark coating of so-called desert varnish that clings to the rock. Some of the designs are easy to identify as humans and animals, but there are also abstract designs that appear to be humanoid, but with horns on their heads. It's entirely possible that we'll never understand all of the stories being told here. Ring of Sissianis. If you know and love the works of J.R.R. Tolkien, you'll be familiar with the concept of one ring to rule them all. If that fictional ring has a real-life historical equivalent, perhaps it's the Ring of Sissianis. This ancient Roman gold ring was stolen from its owner, Silvianus, 1,600 years ago. Legend has it that the distraught Silvianus consulted with witches to ensure that the thief would be cursed, along with anyone who owned the ring in the future. Today it's owned by the British National Trust and displayed at Venn Manor in Basingstoke, Hampshire. Silvianus always believed that it was Sennacianus, one of his peers, who was responsible for his theft. The curse he subsequently had inscribed upon a lead plate and left at the Temple of Nodens is a testament to his rage. It reads, "Silvianus has lost a ring and donated half of its worth to Nodens. The gods will permit its bearer no good health until it is returned to this temple." It appears that his suspicions were correct because an inscription inside the ring reads, "Sissianis, may you live with God." That's quite an arrogant thing to have inscribed in a ring you've stolen. But then again, thieves have strange morals. Yleshoff Ancient Site. The ancient site of Yleshoff in Sumburg, Scotland looks like something that was taken from the pages of a Tolkien novel and then recreated by a present-day movie crew. Instead, this archaeological wonder is both genuine and ancient. Nobody lives here today, but Yleshoff was occupied for a very long time. The oldest structures at the site were created during the Bronze Age, with the most recent added as recently as the early 18th century. Somehow the site managed to be forgotten almost as soon as it was abandoned, only for it to be rediscovered by archaeologists of the 19th century after a storm in the region razed the cliffs and exposed the ancient stones. The oldest Bronze Age village at Yleshoff was erected around 4,500 years ago, upon which another village was built during the Iron Age, and then another was built by Norse invaders in the early 9th century. The only surviving structure that's above ground level today is the Old House of Sumburg, which is said in folklore to be the first castle ever built by Scotsmen. It's the grass topping that's grown across so many of the structures at Yleshoff that gives it its fantasy-like air, but you have to peer beneath the grass to see the area's true history. Indus Valley Pot. If you fancy yourself as an antique hunter or an amateur archaeologist, a great way to get started would be to go to flea markets. You'd be surprised at how often people sell objects without having any clue about their true value. In 2018, Carl Martin was at such a market in his hometown in England when he came across an ornately decorated ceramic pot. The seller told him that he'd been using it as a toothbrush holder and wanted a price equivalent to $10 for it. Carl is a professional auctioneer and realized the true value of the piece immediately. He paid the price the seller wanted and walked off with his purchase, hardly able to believe his luck. The pot is actually a 3,900-year-old relic of the Indus Valley civilization of Western India. It was probably brought into England from India at great expense many decades ago, but somehow ended up in the hands of someone who had no idea what they were dealing with. Its true value is at least several $100s, and perhaps if the right buyer could be found, more than 1,000. Carl has yet to cash in on his bargain but hasn't ruled out the idea of doing so in the future. Towi Stone Mystery. Seeing as we are in Scotland, where we'll also find many examples of Neolithic art, let's talk about the mysteries known as either the Towi stones or Towi balls. They're sometimes labeled more simply as the carved stone balls, which isn't a very imaginative title. The balls are not especially rare, but finding multiple examples of them doesn't get us any closer to understanding why they were made or what they were used for. The first example turned up in Aberdeenshire in the 19th century, but more of them were still being found as recently as 2013. They're small enough to fit in the palm of your hand, measuring on average between 2 and 5 inches in diameter, and can be made of any common rock from granite to sandstone. Rather than being spherical, they're deliberately covered in raised areas and decorated with intricate lines and circle patterns. Similar patterns have also been found on artifacts belonging to the Picts, who lived in Scotland 2,800 years ago. But the stones are far older than that. Some are thought to be more than 5,000 years old. Theories as to their use range from their potential use as weapons to a sort of resume carried around by masons to demonstrate their skills when seeking paid employment. But they're just guesses. Glass spearhead find. We've already had a discovery in Australia in our video, and now we're going back there to check out this extremely rare glass spearhead which was found on the Australian island of Rottnest in June 2017. The artifact is such a beautiful shade of green that it could almost pass for an emerald. The discovery of the object was a very fortuitous one. Professor Len Collard from the University of Western Australia was on a fact-finding mission on the island with a group of students when one of them spotted a sparkling object in the undergrowth. After a little research, they quickly realized that it came from the point of a weapon and is at least 200 years old. Clear glass spearheads have been found on the island before, as have ceramic spearheads, but this green glass type is the first of its kind to be discovered there. Rather than being used for hunting, it was probably used for trade, although it might briefly have been used for hunting quokka wallabies before becoming a bartering aid. Rather than keeping the artifact, Len and his students reburied it at the place of its discovery to respect Aboriginal beliefs about leaving the past where you find it. Manin portal. It would be a little glib to describe Manin in Cornwall, England as a stone circle inside a stone circle, but it would also technically be accurate. The stone circle is a landmark in this part of the Cornish countryside, and at the heart of it is a circular stone with a hole carved through the center of it like a giant donut. Dating stones and rocks is notoriously difficult for archaeologists, so experts aren't sure whether Manin dates to the Neolithic era or the Bronze Age. Either way, it's safe to say that the stones were cut and positioned here several thousand years ago. Local legends say that the circular stone is a magic portal, and that passing through it will improve your health. It might even make you more fertile in the process. It's also said that the circle is guarded by a type of fairy known as a piskie, and that the piskie will harshly punish anybody who attempts to damage the stone. The mysterious aura of the site is enhanced by the fact that it's almost totally hidden by farmland and can't be seen by visitors until they're almost on top of it. Orok rock carving. Scratching shapes and patterns into pieces of rock is the earliest form of human expression. We've been drawing the things around us for almost as long as we've been sentient. Ancient rock carvings are always interesting, but this limestone carving of an Orok, discovered in the Abry-Blanchard rock shelter in France in 2012, challenges our existing notions about human history. The artifact is astonishingly old. Archaeologists believe that it was carved 38,000 years ago. Aurochs are the ancestors of all modern forms of domestic cattle, but the species itself became extinct during the 16th century. What's odd about the presence of an Orok carving here is that there wouldn't have been any of them in the surrounding area. The people who lived here all that time ago hunted reindeer, not Oroks. The style of carving is consistent with examples that have been found in Germany and further afield in Europe. That suggests two things. Firstly, a degree of culture sharing between France and Germany, and secondly, the fact that the people living in this cave had a concept of what an Orok was, despite having none to look at in their local area. The answer might be that they traveled much farther and wider than we've always believed they did, and so history would have to be rewritten. In a remote region of Mongolia, explorers discovered a massive metal door embedded in a cliffside. The finding caused great astonishment among archaeologists and scientists. The discovery began when local mountaineers noticed strange markings on the rock. Amateur archaeologist Timur Butsaikhan decided to investigate and realized that part of the cliff was actually rusted metal. A team of specialists was sent to the site and identified the structure as a huge circular hatch, similar to the doors of ancient vaults. Surprisingly, despite the rust, the mechanisms appeared to be well preserved. It is estimated that the door is at least 1,000 years old, but its origin remains a mystery. The technology used in its construction is far too advanced for its time, raising many questions about the civilization that could have built it. Around the door, archaeologists found inscriptions in an unknown language and are trying to decipher them. Meanwhile, various theories have emerged. It could be an ancient Mongolian treasure, a secret chamber of a lost civilization, or even a vast underground space, such as a shelter or secret base. Local authorities have sealed off the area and prohibited public access, but that hasn't stopped curious individuals from attempting to get closer. The Mongolian government has requested international assistance to safely open the door. Experts warn that the process could take years, as a single mistake could compromise the structure or whatever lies inside. The mystery of the door has sparked debates in academic circles and among conspiracy theorists. If it is ever opened, it could reveal one of the greatest archaeological secrets in history. Hinsgavl Dagger Find. We're looking at discoveries old and new in this video, so here's one that comes from 1867. It's the Hinsgavl dagger, which was found on the Danish island of Geno. Experts consider it the finest example of a fishtail flint dagger in existence, and say that it comes from the end of the Nordic Stone Age. That would make it around 3,800 years old. In Denmark, the Hinsgavl dagger is considered a national cultural icon, so much so that it appears on the country's 100 krona banknote. The description of the artifact as a fishtail dagger comes from the shape of its handle, although you could also argue that the shape of the blade looks like a fish too. It's thought that their design was based on bronze daggers made elsewhere in Europe. Some of these daggers found their way to Denmark, and although the ancient Danes couldn't replicate them, they were able to make something similar from local flint. Similar daggers continued to be made well into the region's Bronze Age, so it was a design that lasted for several centuries. Helgo Buddha Mystery. As we conduct further research and study into the world's oldest trading civilizations and networks, we find out that they were more sophisticated than we could possibly have imagined a few years ago. One of the most compelling examples of this is the Helgo Buddha. The religious artifact was made somewhere between the 6th and 7th centuries, probably either in northern India or Afghanistan. It was found during archaeological excavations at Helgo, Sweden in 1954. As most of the discoveries made at Helgo date back to the Viking era of the 7th century, it can be assumed that it arrived here not long after it was made. The archaeologists who found it considered it to be such an out-of-place artifact that they barely wanted to consider the implications of it, but we now accept that it's solid evidence of trade links between the Middle East or Far East and Sweden well over 1,000 years ago. It also further underlines the point that while the Vikings are often portrayed as a violent, barbaric race of conquerors and invaders, sometimes deservedly so, they were also accomplished travelers and traders. Kaaba Zartosh. The Naqshi Rustam complex in Iran is a place that contains many ancient mysteries, but few buildings there provoke as much interest as the Kaaba Zartosh. The name translates into English as the Cube of Zoroaster, but it's actually a replica of the Prisoner of Solomon in Pasargadae, which was the first capital of the ancient Achaemenid Empire. Legend has it that within the structure there was once a fire that never went out, and that this fire was the source of all similar fires that once burned inside Zoroastrian temples. However, a lack of ventilation inside the Kaaba Zartosh means this is unlikely to have been the case, unless the ancient inhabitants of Naqshi Rustam had a means of keeping a flame burning without it. The cube has been studied by countless academics, historians, and archaeologists, but there's still no consensus about its true purpose. Almost every expert agrees that it served a religious function, but nobody knows what the religious function was. The structure stands exactly opposite the mausoleum of Darius II, who ruled 2,400 years ago. So there may be a connection, but it's a connection we can only guess at. Emperor's Lost Vase. Earlier on, we heard about an old ceramic Indian pot that turned out to be an incredible antique fair discovery. It was a great story, but it's got nothing on this next one. Several years ago, an anonymous buyer in England bought this cute Chinese case from a charity shop for £1. He kept it for a few years and then decided to sell it on eBay in 2019 with an asking price of £10. He was quickly flooded with offers, which prompted him to take it to an expert and have it valued. The expert nearly fell off their chair. This is an incredibly rare 18th century vase that was made specifically for Emperor Qianlong. The emperor's family rose is marked on the vase, which is also an indication that it should never have been removed from his palace. The question of how and why it came to be removed and find its way to England is unanswered. The flat back of the otherwise pear-shaped vase suggests that it was originally intended to be mounted on a wall, whereas the attractive yellow shade was reserved for the emperor's use only. Its true value is closer to 80,000 English pounds, equivalent to around $110,000. It's now been sold, only this time through a professional auction house rather than eBay. Subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and enjoy watching new videos on my channel. Thanks for watching, and see you soon.